Mr. Trevor Mannion ค่ะเขาเป็นใครเขาเป็น Director of Enrolment ค่ะของ Glenyon Norfolk School นะคะที่ประเทศแคนาดาค่ะเดี๋ยวเรามาดูนะคะว่าทางสปีกเกอร์ของเราเนี่ยพร้อมกันแล้วหรือยัง Oh hello Mr. Trevor
Hello
Hi.
hello thank you for having me
Yeah. Welcome to our CETA virtual high school fair. How are you?
I am wonderful. It's evening time here in Canada, but I'm very happy to be here and to share with you a little bit about our country and our education system as well.
Thank you very much. So we are not going to waste your time. I'm sure that you are ready to share your information and your experience to our parents and students. So we would like to hand over this screen for you.
Wonderful. Well, I will share my presentation and
Sure.
hopefully everyone can see that all right. So as we've said, my name is Trevor Mannion and I'm the Director of Enrollment at Glenyon Norfolk School in Victoria, Canada. So welcome. Canada is quite an amazing place. It is the second largest country by land area in the world, but it only has the population equivalent to that of the state of California. So we have a lot of space and not very many people, and approximately 95% of Canadians live within 150 kilometers of the United States border. So the vast majority of the country is beautiful landscapes. We do have some amazing cities. This is the city of Vancouver. Our country stretches over 7,000 kilometers from east to west and approximately 4,500 kilometers from south to north. We have 4 distinct seasons. We have winter, summer, spring, and fall. We have mountains, we have flatlands and prairies. We have beautiful landscapes and lakes, the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean. And then we share the longest land border in the world with the United States. So we do have some very amazing and beautiful areas to explore and to visit, but it is all very different across the country. There are very distinct areas and very different areas. So Canada is very big and has many different options for students and for families looking to study abroad. We also have some amazing history and culture. Canada is a relatively young country that was founded in the 1800s, but we have hundreds of years of indigenous history, and of very strong relationships with our communities. And our leadership of our country is also very stable and very proud to be Canadian. And we do sometimes apologize a little bit too much. And then we do have a political system that is a representative democracy. And as I said, we do border 3 different oceans, and so there is so much to explore. Now, why Canada? When I was thinking about putting this presentation together, a number of things came to mind. We have an excellent education system that is very highly regulated and has very high standards and is recognized around the world. So much so that many countries actually have Canadian schools in them for expatriates and for local students to attend because of how rigorous and standardized our curriculum is. It's also a very safe and very secure country. So I know sending your children and your loved ones abroad can sometimes be a scary thought, but it is very safe with very little violence. Our cities are very well protected, and it's a very welcoming space. Canada is also a very diverse country. Our cities have often hundreds, if not thousands, of different backgrounds and languages and cultures and countries represented in them. And we really pride ourselves in that diversity and being open to and welcoming to individuals from around the world, regardless of their background, their views, their religion, how much money they have. It's about who you are as a person. And as a Canadian, I feel very proud to welcome so many different backgrounds and amazing individuals from around the world to our country. There are also options for immigration to Canada, pathways for immigration after completing post-secondary programs. So at the university level, once you complete a university degree in Canada, it is relatively simple process to achieve permanent residency or citizenship here as well, with many students often deciding to stay after they've completed their studies. And with our education system for international students, there are also options for many different budget ranges, so that we have schools that are more affordable, we have schools that are more expensive, and everything in between. And one of the greatest things, having gone to a school with international students myself, and actually with students from Thailand, you build lifelong friendships. And I think that's not just Canada, but anywhere that you go as an international student into a welcoming community and country, that you will build connections and friendships that will last your entire lifetime. I know that has been the case for me with the connections I've made. Now, the pathways of education in Canada are very similar to that of the United States, where elementary school starts usually in kindergarten or grade 1 around 4 or 5 years of age and goes through to the 5th grade. Students are around maybe 10 or 11 at that stage. Some provinces in Canada, so some regions, have a middle school, which is grades 6, 7, and 8. Others don't. The elementary school will actually go from grade 1 to grade 8. So there are different structures, but generally speaking, the elementary and middle school ages, by the end of the time students have reached grade 8, they do transition into what we call high school in Canada, as with many other parts of the world. And that's from grades 9 through 12, so approximately 13 years of age to 17 years of age. And it's following that final year in high school that students choose which option comes next, whether that is a 2-year community college, a 4-year college or university, going back home somewhere for schooling, or sometimes students will do a 2-year program followed by another 4-year program, and then of course can go on to do master's programs, PhD programs, postgraduate programs, and research, and so on. And I'll talk a little bit more about our university system later on. But in many, many ways, our structure and timing is very similar to that of the United States. Now, the curriculum in Canada is regulated by each province. And so Canada has 13 provinces and territories, each of them maintaining regulation over their own curriculum. And so there are different curriculums available, but they all share common threads in terms of the content and the subjects that students study, the learning outcomes and what we want students to achieve, and how this is delivered. And so there are small differences, but generally the Canadian curriculum is very similar. But that being said, there are schools in Canada, like my school, for example, Glenyon Norfolk School, that have other options. So we are an international baccalaureate program school, or an IB school. And the international baccalaureate is an internationally accredited and recognized curriculum. And I saw that there was another presentation happening later today about the IB, so I won't go into too much detail about that. There is also advanced placement options. This is a US model through the College Board, where students can take more advanced courses in high school and receive university credit for it. And then there are some hybrid programs where students may take some AP, some IB, some provincial curriculum, and it could be a combination. And so it's important when you're considering where you might like to go or what you might like to do, to look at the type of curriculum that might be the best fit for you and for your plans. And the Canadian curriculum, as I said, is internationally recognized and held to a very high standard. Many of our schools here in Canada as well do offer ESL support for English language learners, and students are assessed through the application process to these schools to determine if they need any support, and if so, to which level that support is required. There's often an additional fee for the ESL programs at most schools, but it is an option and could be something that students may require in order to be successful in their experience here. Now, as much as the school experience in Canada is about the academic components, outside of school or the co-curricular opportunities also are very important in creating a well-rounded student experience. And these will be different at every school and in different cities where they can take advantage of the natural landscape. But a recommendation I always give to students looking to study or travel abroad is to get involved, to take advantage of these opportunities, and to really try to make connections and even try new things. There are many different sports that schools will offer in Canada, traditional sports like basketball and soccer and rugby, other sports like hiking or backpacking or rowing can also be options. And because we have 4 distinct seasons in Canada, these sports will be different at different times of year depending on the weather and the climate of the area that students are studying in. There are also clubs or interest-based groups, and these are great ways for students to get involved and connected with other like-minded students. So it could be a chess club, it could be a volunteering club, it could be a dance club, many different options, again, depending on the school and the location. And then many schools have volunteering opportunities as well. And this is so students can give back to their community in different ways. Sometimes it's the school community, the local community, or even the global community, with schools offering trips to travel abroad and give back to other communities. And this looks very good on university applications when you're considering what comes after the high school. There's also some exciting Canadian experiences. So having such a diverse culture across the country, there are many different specialities in terms of food, in terms of cultural experiences and museums. Canada also has a rich history of celebrating Indigenous culture, or the original settlers of our land here in Canada. And so there's some very strong traditions and fascinating culture to learn about in that regard. And then, of course, as you saw from some of the photos earlier, many winter activities as well. And these can include skiing and snowboarding, snowshoeing, building igloos for fun. We don't live in igloos here in Canada, but we do have the beauty of snow so that we can build them if we want something fun to do. And then, of course, have fun. It's as much as it's about studying, it's also about having fun and making connections and making friends and embracing the experience. Now, the calendar in terms of year to year, again, is very similar to that of the United States. School starts in September and goes from September usually through to mid-December. And then students get a 2 to 3 week break. Sometimes the students will go home. Sometimes they can stay in Canada. It depends on the school and the program. And then in January, classes resume. There's usually a 1 to 2 week spring break sometime in March. And this is a time to relax and recharge. Most students won't travel home over this break because it is shorter. And then May and June, school finishes. There's exams, there's graduation, there's final projects. And then July and August is the summer break before students then return to complete another year. Now, there are a couple of different types of schedules that schools will offer, and this has expanded a little bit with the coronavirus pandemic. So some schools will offer a term system where the year is broken into 3 sections, usually from one section from September to November, one from December to February, and one from March to June. And students will study the same 8 or 9 subjects throughout the entire year. And so they have breaks just to time mid-year exams and tests, and sometimes a long weekend. But with a term system, students study the same subjects all year. Whereas a semester system, students will typically study 4 or 5 subjects from September to January, and then the remaining 4 or 5 subjects from February to June. So the year is broken into 2 sections where you're taking different courses at different times of year. And then we've seen a lot of this happening this year with the coronavirus pandemic, where some of the public school systems have moved to a format of a block style of learning where you take one subject for 5 weeks, or you take 2 subjects for 10 weeks. And then at the end of those 5 weeks or 10 weeks, that subject is done, you get a short break, and then you start the next subject. And so this is of course, these are different things to consider when you're looking at what schooling options may be, especially in high school, where do you want to be taking lots of courses at once, a few at once, or just 1 or 2 at a time? There are different options for different students. Now for families that may travel together abroad with younger children, this slide may be not so relevant, but for families that are considering sending their students abroad on their own, there's an important consideration to look at between traditional boarding programs, which are where students live in dormitories. The dormitories can be on or off campus. There's very structured programming for weekends, for the meals, for evening homework time. And within these residential buildings, there's anywhere from 30 to 60 students usually, with usually 2 to 3 students living in each bedroom. There are also teachers that live on the property that act as your parents away from home. And there is definitely greater consistency in the student experience, but traditional boarding programs tend to be a little bit more on the expensive side. The other option is homestay or family boarding. You may hear it called either. And this is where the student, upon arriving in Canada, would move into someone's home. And this is someone that has signed up to host an international student and receives a fee on a monthly basis to do this, to provide food and shelter and a loving home environment. With a public system, you're more likely to hear it called homestay, whereas in private schools, it's more likely to be called family boarding. And with family boarding, it's a guaranteed that the family that is hosting the student has a connection to the school, where homestay, there may or may not be a connection to the school. So the student who's joining this family would participate in weekend and evening activities, on short trips that they may go on. And really, it's almost like the family is adding another child to their family for the year. And this comes in at a lower price point, or more affordable price point, but there is also the possibility for greater variability in the student experience. Now, when you think about choosing a school, of course, the first thing to consider is where, in terms of which country. But if you were to settle on Canada as a country, it's important to consider a number of things. So I thought I'd put together a list of questions that may be helpful for you. What is the climate like? Canada is vast and very different from coast to coast. There's parts of Canada that are -20 or -30 degrees below Celsius right now. The part of Canada that I'm in right now is about 6 degrees above 0 degrees Celsius. And so it's very different at different times of year. Is the school in a city, or is it in a more rural area, maybe in farmlands or in areas that are less populated? And what are you looking for? Are you looking for a city experience, or maybe a more nature-filled experience? Public or private? And this is an important consideration, again, both in terms of price point, but also in terms of the student experience. Public schools often have a homestay program, like we just talked about, where you will live with a family that maybe has a connection to the school, but there's often less structured programming in the evenings, on the weekends, and so on. Where private schools or independent schools tend to offer a little bit more in terms of structure and programming and clubs and sports, all within the package of one price. But their price point is often a little bit higher. And again, so there are many, many, many different options. There are so many great schools here in Canada, but the public versus private is an important consideration. Something else to ask when you're looking at schools is how many other international students are at the school and where are they from? This is often good to understand the makeup of the school. Is it primarily an international school? Is it primarily a local school that has some international students, or is it in the middle somewhere? And so that can have, depending on what you're looking for, can have different impacts on the experience. What sports and activities and clubs are available? And you may see some things on the list that is provided by the schools that you may not know of, but looking them up on the internet and not being afraid to try new things can really help enhance your experience. Am I looking for a boarding program or a homestay program? In a sense, they are both boarding, but residential boarding where you're living in a dormitory, or homestay where you're living with a family. And do you want a roommate or do you want your own room? Again, these are important considerations. And of course, the big question when it all comes down to it, what is my budget? And that is often one of the biggest factors in creating your initial list of schools. Am I looking at schools that are in the more affordable range, in the middle, or on the more expensive range? Because that is one of the biggest determinations of what options may be available for you. And how long do I plan to study in Canada? Am I looking for 6 months, for a year, or am I coming through and planning to graduate from the school I arrive at? And what am I hoping to gain from this experience? And this will become more relevant in the next slide, but it's an important thing to think about, because when you're applying to the schools, you will often be asked what you're excited about. So having put some thought into why you want to go to a certain school or to a certain country or to a certain region can be very helpful. Now, how to apply. This primarily relates to secondary schools, but there are some requirements, and this is relatively standard across the board. Schools require report cards from your previous school to understand your educational history. The majority of schools will have a requirement that you have up-to-date immunizations and vaccinations as per the Canadian travel schedules. There is often almost always an assessment. There's both an English assessment as well as an academic assessment. And sometimes these are done through the school, and sometimes these are done using third parties, through TOEFL, through IELTS, through the SSAT, and then most schools have an interview as well, where they get to know you. And then some schools require recommendation letters, personal statements, or maybe examples of projects that you've worked on. And then after high school, the majority of students do go on to some sort of post-secondary studies. It could be a college or a university or some form of program. There are many amazing universities in Canada. Some of the top-ranked universities in the world are located in Canada. This photos of the University of British Columbia, or UBC, one of the largest and most highly ranked universities in the country. The application process at Canadian universities is often a little bit different than the application process at US universities, where Canadian universities primarily look at your grades, the marks that you achieved in your final 2 years of high school, and sometimes an extra personal statement and maybe a few other pieces. There is also a difference in tuition. International students pay substantially more than Canadian students, where Canadian students receive a subsidy from the government. The applications also start in the final year of high school, usually around September or October of your grade 12 year. And these universities have incredibly diverse international populations. Canada is one of the top university study destinations worldwide. And so we are a net importer of international students for our education system. And with that, I have finished the slides and would be happy to answer any questions that may be there.
Thank you for your session and information about the Canadian curriculum. About the questions from us, so we would like you to share a little bit more about, like what age of the international student that, Canada would accept into the school over there.
Great question. So primarily students, if they are not traveling with their parents to live in Canada together, grade 9 is approximately the recommended start time. Sometimes a little bit younger, but about 13 to 14 years of age is on the younger side of when international students would be eligible to study.
Okay, and would you like to share a little bit more, like about how the school over there, like support the international students? Because like Canada is quite far away from Asia, so the students have to travel, like probably like from Thailand, I guess like about a day to get there. So they might face some kind of homesickness and stuff. So from your experience, how does school over there support the international students?
That's a great question. There are three ways that come to mind. The first is through school counselors, and these are counselors specifically trained in student mental health and wellness. And so they can provide help and resources if students are feeling homesick or would like someone to talk to or to help them. The second is through the international program that the students come through. There is often a support team in place to help with communicating with parents, with providing supports to the students, with helping them to adjust. There's often also an orientation program before the school year starts that international students can sign up for. And this allows them a few days to connect with their peers and with others, and to learn about Canada and to be welcomed by the school before school starts. And then there are, of course, the teachers, all very, very caring, and if they recognize or see a student that is maybe struggling or having a challenge, they will reach out to the student in almost every case and ask how they can help and provide some support in that way. And then some schools also have specific coordinators for international students that are available all the time to help.
Yes, that sounds really helpful. So I think I would like to ask just only one more question for you, because I understand it's quite late for you at the moment over at the Canada, right? So the last question is, like for the international students or parents that are thinking about sending their child to Canada, but they are not confident about their English, like how the school or, like will have like how the school will support them, or is this going to be a barrier for the student to, to pursue their dream to study in Canada?
That's a great question. It depends on the school. So some schools have very advanced English as a second language programs, where others have smaller ESL programs or English second language programs. But some schools have the ability to support students that speak almost no English whatsoever. Our school, for example, can support students that have some background in English, but maybe need a lot of work still. So we need students to speak just a little bit, and we can work with them. But there are lots of different options, as well as private tutors that are available. But I would recommend that if language is a concern, to reach out to the school and to ask the question. I know myself, and I can. I'm sure many of my colleagues across the country would be happy to help guide the student in a specific case.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think that's a really helpful answer, and I would like to thank you again about your time, like to spend with, our CETA Virtual World High School Fair. I believe that our parents and students got a lot of useful information from you, and then they can make a decision to pursue their dreams in Canada. It's such a beautiful country, and one day I would like to visit over there as well, like one of my, dream destination to visit. So, but it's a little bit far away. So, but today, like, thank you very much. So I hope you have a great night, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much, and you're welcome in Canada anytime to everyone here. I hope to see you soon. Thank you.